The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and the doors slid open to reveal the long silver corridor of the Galactic Unity Academy. Kira Vasquez stepped out carrying nothing but a worn duffel bag over one shoulder. She was 19 years old, average height, with dark hair tied back in a simple knot, and calm brown eyes that moved slowly across everything without rushing. Her hands were rough with old calluses. She wore the standard gray uniform of a new student, and nothing about her appearance demanded attention. That was the point. The Academy floated in orbit above the gas giant Velhari Prime, a massive station called Pinnacle Ascendant. It was the most respected military and diplomatic training school in the known galaxy. The children of ambassadors studied here. The sons and daughters of warlords sharpened their minds here. Noble families from 100 different species sent their best and brightest through its doors, and those who graduated carried influence for the rest of their lives. Kira was none of those things. She carried no family crest. She had no political name. She was here on a scholarship, the first human admitted in over 12 years. Most species in the galaxy knew about Earth the way someone might know about a storm on a distant planet. They had heard it was dangerous. They had read the reports, but very few had ever actually met a human in person, and even fewer took them seriously. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. That meant something on paper. In practice, most students at the Academy had grown up on garden worlds with gentle gravity, stable climates, and ecosystems that did not actively try to kill everything inside them. To them, the word Deathworld sounded dramatic and almost silly, like a story meant to frighten children. Kira walked through the main atrium where dozens of alien species moved between classes and training halls. A group of tall, feathered Velini glanced at her and whispered. A pair of thick-skinned Gorvathi guards standing by the entrance barely looked down. She was small by galactic standards, unremarkable. She found her assigned quarters on the 4th residential ring. The door opened to a modest room with 2 bunks, 2 desks, and a shared washroom. Sitting on the far bunk was her new roommate, a Marani named Shale. Shale was an insectid species, slender and delicate, with large amber compound eyes and thin translucent wings folded flat against her back. She was roughly Kira's height but looked like she weighed half as much. When the door opened, Shale flinched so hard she nearly fell off the bed. "You are the human," Shale said. Her voice was soft and carried a faint clicking undertone. "I am," Kira said. She set her bag down gently and smiled. "I'm Kira." Shale stared at her for a long moment, her mandibles twitching with visible anxiety. "I read your species file. It said your homeworld has apex predators in every biome. It said your blood carries iron. It said your skeletal density is nearly double the galactic average." Kira sat on her bunk and began unpacking. It also probably said we sleep 8 hours a night and sneeze when there is dust in the air. We are not that scary. Shale did not look convinced, but she did not leave either. Over the next 2 days, Kira made no sudden movements around her. She spoke softly. She asked about Shale's research interests and listened when Shale talked about xenolinguistics for 40 minutes without stopping. By the 3rd morning, Shale had stopped flinching when Kira entered the room. By the 5th, she was saving Kira a seat in the mess hall. It was in the mess hall that Kira first encountered Lord Draven Salvathi. Draven was impossible to miss. He stood over 7 feet tall, a Kethvari, a reptilian species with dense green-black scales, powerful limbs, a thick tail, and a crest of sharp bone ridges running from his forehead to the back of his skull. His eyes were gold and slit-pupiled, and they carried the lazy confidence of someone who had never once been told no. His family was one of the most powerful military houses in the Kethvari Dominion, and everyone at the Academy knew it. He ruled Cohort Vethon, the training unit Kira had been assigned to, through a combination of physical intimidation and political weight. No one challenged him. No one corrected him. The instructors watched but rarely intervened because Draven was careful to stay just inside the rules. On Kira's first day in the mess hall, Draven noticed her. He was sitting at the center of a long table surrounded by his usual circle, a mix of species who had learned that proximity to Draven meant safety. He looked at Kira the way someone might look at an insect on their food. "So this is the Deathworlder," he said, loud enough for the tables around him to hear. His voice was deep and resonant, built for authority. "The mud-world vermin they let in on charity." A few of his circle laughed. Others glanced nervously at Kira. Kira continued eating. She did not look up. She did not react at all. Draven tilted his head, his crest flaring slightly. "I heard humans are supposed to be dangerous. This one looks like she would break if I sneezed on her." More laughter, louder this time. Shale, sitting beside Kira, was trembling. Her wings buzzed faintly with distress. Kira reached over without looking and gently placed her hand on Shale's arm. The trembling slowed. "It is fine," Kira said quietly. "Words do not leave bruises." She finished her meal, cleaned her tray, and left the hall without ever making eye contact with Draven. Shale hurried after her, glancing back over her shoulder. Draven watched them go with a smirk on his scaled face. He turned back to his circle and said something that made them all laugh again. He had made his judgment. The human was nothing, a quiet little creature from a loud little planet. She had heard his insults and done nothing. In Draven's world, that meant one thing: submission. He was wrong, but he would not learn that yet. Across the hall, seated alone at a corner table, Commander Vales observed the entire exchange. He was a Torvan, broad, gray-skinned, with 4 muscular arms and a face full of old scars. He had fought in 3 border wars and had trained more soldiers than most species had in their entire armies. He said nothing as he watched the human girl leave. Then he pulled out his data pad and opened her file. He read it slowly. His eyes moved across the screen, and something in his expression shifted, not surprise exactly, but recognition. The look of a man who understood weight. He closed the file and set the pad down. "They have no idea," he said to no one, "what that world makes." Training at the academy began the following week, and Kira settled into its rhythm like water finding the shape of a glass. Every morning started with physical trials. Endurance runs through the station's variable gravity corridors, obstacle courses designed to test reflexes and coordination, and strength assessments that measured raw output against species baselines. After that came tactical simulations, combat theory lectures, and strategy workshops that ran late into the evening. Kira passed everything. She never failed a single test, but she never stood out either. She ran fast enough to land in the middle of the pack, never at the front. In the strength assessments, she lifted what was expected and stopped. In the obstacle courses, she moved with smooth efficiency but never pushed for a top time. When the cohort sparred in hand-to-hand drills, she let her partners work through their techniques and only defended, never attacked with any real force. To most of cohort Vethan, she was average, unremarkable, just a small human doing her best to keep up with species that were bigger, taller, and supposedly stronger. Shale was the first to notice the cracks in that mask. It happened during a routine equipment check in the training hall. A storage rack loaded with steel sparring weights, easily 300 kilograms by galactic standard, began to tip when a locking clamp failed. 2 students scrambled backward. Shale froze directly beneath it. Kira caught it with one hand. She did not brace herself. She did not strain. She simply reached up and stopped the rack from falling the way someone might catch a cup sliding off a table. Then she pushed it back into place with a casual shove and re-engaged the clamp. The 2 students who had jumped away stared at her. Shale stared at her. Kira looked at them all and shrugged. "Bad clamp," she said. "Someone should report that." Later that evening, Shale sat cross-legged on her bunk and watched Kira read a tactical theory manual as if nothing had happened. "That rack weighed 300 kilos, Shale said. "Did it?" Kira said without looking up. "You caught it with one arm. You did not even shift your stance." Kira turned a page. Adrenaline is a strange thing. Shale's compound eyes narrowed. Your resting heart rate is 42 beats per minute. I checked when you were sleeping. That is the heart rate of an endurance predator. You barely sweat during full-effort runs. And today you stopped a 300-kilogram object with one hand and you did not even blink. Kira finally looked up. She held Shale's gaze for a moment, and something passed between them, not a confession but an understanding. Some things are easier to carry when nobody knows how strong you are, Kira said quietly. Shale did not push further, but she began watching more carefully after that. 3 days later, the Academy held its weekly xenobiology lecture. Professor Tiavan, a willowy Salvathi with 6 eyes and a voice like dry leaves, stood before a projection screen and began a unit on extreme biosphere classification. Halfway through the lecture, Earth's file appeared on the screen. The room went still. The data scrolled past in cold, clinical detail. Tectonic instability rated at 9.2 out of 10. Predator density across all biomes classified as extreme. A pathogen mutation rate that exceeded galactic safety thresholds by a factor of 11. Atmospheric oxygen content high enough to fuel devastating wildfires across entire continents. Ocean depths that crushed anything not specifically evolved to survive them. And then, at the bottom of the profile, a single number that made several students shift in their seats. Gravity 1 standard. Professor Tiavan let the number sit on the screen. Most of you evolved in gravitational environments between 0.4 and 0.7 standard, she said. Your bones, your muscles, your circulatory systems are built for those conditions. A human being is born, raised, and trained in gravity that is nearly double what many of you have ever experienced. Their bones are denser. Their muscles carry more fiber per square centimeter. Their cardiovascular systems are designed to pump blood upward against a force that would leave most of you bedridden within days. She paused and looked out at the class. Several students were staring at Kira, who sat in the 4th row with her stylus in hand, pretending to take notes. Humans are, by any objective measure, one of the most physically durable sapient species in the known galaxy, Professor Tiavan continued. This is not opinion, it is biology. Kira did not look up. She kept writing, her expression neutral, her posture relaxed. But Shale, sitting beside her, noticed that she had stopped actually writing anything. The stylus was just moving in slow circles. After the lecture, no one spoke to Kira directly about it, but the glances changed. There was a new quality to them, not respect exactly, but the beginning of caution. Draven, however, was not cautious. He was angry. The lecture had irritated him. The idea that a small, quiet creature from a barbaric world could be described as physically superior to his own species, a species bred for conquest, was an insult he could not swallow. He did not challenge the professor. He did not argue the science. Instead, he did what he always did. He went after those who could not fight back. Over the next 2 weeks, Draven's harassment shifted. He stopped targeting Kira directly. Her silence had made her a boring target. Instead, he went after the people around her. He accidentally knocked Shale's research project off a table and stepped on it, cracking the data tablet she had been working on for weeks. He tripped a smaller Valini student named Reth who had been sitting with Kira at lunch, sending him sprawling across the mess hall floor. He spread rumors that anyone who associated with the human was marking themselves as weak. Each time it happened in the gray spaces, hallways without cameras, moments when instructors were not watching, situations where his word would outweigh anyone else's. His family name was a shield, and he wielded it with practiced cruelty. And each time, Kira quietly cleaned up the damage. She repaired Shale's data tablet overnight, soldering the cracked screen with tools she borrowed from the engineering lab. She walked Reth to the medical bay and sat with him until the swelling in his ankle went down. She said nothing about Draven. She filed no reports. She simply absorbed the impact and kept moving. Shale asked her once why she did not fight back. Kira was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When I was 14, I broke a boy's jaw. He had been hurting my younger sister. I hit him once and his face came apart under my fist. I heard the sound it made and I have never forgotten it." She looked at her hands. "I grew up in a place where everything was trying to kill us. The weather, the animals, the ground itself. I learned to fight before I learned to read. But fighting is easy. Knowing when not to fight, that took me much longer." Shale said nothing. She simply reached out one of her delicate forelimbs and rested it on Kira's shoulder. Then came the night that changed everything. Shale had stayed late in the archive wing, finishing a linguistics assignment. The corridors on the lower levels were dim and empty after curfew. She was halfway back to their quarters when a shadow blocked the hallway ahead of her. Draven stood alone, filling the corridor with his massive frame. His gold eyes caught the low light and glowed. He said nothing at first. He just looked at her the way a predator looks at something small and trapped. "You should choose better friends, little insect," he said. His voice was low and cold. "The human cannot protect you. She cannot even protect herself." Shale tried to step back, but his tail swept behind her and blocked the path. He leaned down, his face inches from hers, and slammed his fist into the wall beside her head. The metal buckled inward with a sharp crack. Shale let out a thin, high sound of terror. "Stay away from her," Draven whispered, "or next time I will not hit the wall." He left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Shale was still standing there, shaking, when Kira found her 10 minutes later. Kira took one look at the dent in the wall, then at Shale's face, and something behind her eyes changed. It was not anger exactly. It was something deeper and quieter, like a door opening onto a room that had been locked for a very long time. She said nothing. She put her arm around Shale and walked her back to their room. But Shale had known Kira long enough now to understand silence, and this silence was not calm. It was the silence before weather. The next morning, Kira woke at her usual time, dressed in her training uniform, and went through her routine as if nothing had happened. She ate breakfast in the mess hall. She attended the morning lecture on fleet-level tactical coordination. She smiled at Shale and asked about her linguistics assignment. Everything about her was calm, measured, and completely ordinary. Shale watched her and said nothing. She had learned that the surface of Kira Vasquez was not always an honest map of what lay beneath. The day's main event was a joint tactical exercise in the Academy's combat simulation hall, a massive circular arena surrounded by tiered observation platforms. All of Cohort Vethan was present, along with 2 visiting cohorts who had been paired for the session. Commander Vales oversaw the exercise from a raised platform at the north end of the arena, his 4 arms folded across his broad chest, his scarred face unreadable. The exercise involved rotating teams through a series of tactical scenarios: breach and clear operations, defensive holds, hostage extractions. Each rotation required new teams, and between rotations the cohort gathered in the center of the arena to receive new assignments. It was during one of these transitions that Draven made his move. Kira was crossing the arena floor toward her next assigned group when Draven stepped into her path. He was fully armored in his training gear, lightweight composite plates over his dense scales, his claws unsheathed, his tail swaying slowly behind him. He towered over her by more than 2 feet. The arena chatter died. Students from all 3 cohorts turned to watch. Draven had a talent for creating silence. "I heard your little pet was upset last night," he said. His voice carried across the open floor. "Perhaps she should learn that weakness invites correction." Kira stopped walking. She stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her brown eyes fixed on Draven's gold ones. She knew. He could see that she knew. The dent in the wall, the threat, the fear on Shale's face. He had done it to provoke exactly this moment, a public confrontation where the small human girl would either cower or embarrass herself. For a long moment, Kira said nothing. The arena held its breath. Then she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried with perfect clarity. "You cornered my friend alone in a dark corridor. You put your fist through a wall beside her head. You threatened her." The silence deepened. Several students exchanged glances. Commander Valey's on his platform above leaned forward slightly. "I have watched you do this for weeks," Kira continued. "You do not go after anyone who can fight back. You choose the small ones, the quiet ones, the ones who have no name or family to protect them. And you do it where no one can see." Draven's crest flared. His golden eyes narrowed to slits. A low hiss escaped between his teeth. "Careful, human," he said. "I am being careful," Kira said. "I am being very careful, because I want everyone in this room to hear what I say next." She took one step closer. She had to tilt her head back to look up at him, and somehow that made her look more dangerous, not less. "If you touch Shale again, if you threaten her, corner her, or go near her, I will invoke a formal challenge against you under Academy Dueling Code, Section 7, Subsection 14. The words landed like a detonation. The dueling codes were ancient, written into the Academy's charter centuries ago when physical disputes between species were common and needed legal framework. They were rarely used in the modern era. Most students had only read about them in history modules, but they were still legally binding. A formal challenge, once accepted, could not be refused without forfeiture of rank and standing. The arena erupted in whispers. Hundreds of eyes locked onto the two figures at its center. Draven stared down at Kira. For a single moment, something flickered behind his golden eyes, not fear, but the faintest shadow of uncertainty. Then it vanished, buried under years of arrogance and the absolute certainty that he was the strongest thing in any room he entered. He laughed. It was a loud, sharp sound that echoed off the arena walls. He turned to the watching crowd and spread his arms wide. "You hear this? The Mud Worlder wants to challenge me. A creature half my size from a planet of animals thinks she can stand against a son of House Salvathi." Some of his followers laughed with him. Many did not. He turned back to Kira. The amusement drained from his face, replaced by something cold and contemptuous. He wanted to end this. He wanted to put her in her place so completely that no one would ever question his dominance again. He struck her. It was an open-handed blow with his right hand, delivered across her face with the full force of his arm. His claws were unsheathed. The impact made a sound like a whip crack. 3 shallow cuts opened across her left cheek where his claws had dragged through skin. The force behind the blow was enough to send most species at the Academy stumbling backward, enough to crack bone in several of the lighter races. Kira did not stumble. She did not step back. She did not even turn her head. She stood exactly where she was, absorbing the full impact of a blow from a 7-foot reptilian warrior, as if he had done nothing more than brush dust from her shoulder. A thin line of blood ran down her cheek. She reached up, touched it with her thumb, and looked at the red smear. Then she looked back at Draven. And she smiled. It was a small smile, quiet and controlled, and it was the most terrifying thing anyone in that arena had ever seen. Because it was not the smile of someone who was angry. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting. "Under Galactic Unity Academy Code 7, Subsection 14, Kira said, her voice steady and clear, "a physical assault initiated by one party upon another constitutes grounds for formal challenge. The challenged party has the right to accept or decline. I accept." Draven's face changed. The arrogance did not vanish, but something beneath it cracked, a foundation shifting under unexpected weight. Commander Valey stood from his platform. His voice boomed across the arena. "A formal challenge has been invoked and accepted under Academy Charter. The duel will take place tomorrow evening in the main arena. Attendance is mandatory for all members of Cohort Vethon. Terms are standard, unarmed combat, no lethal force, victory by submission or incapacitation. He paused and looked directly at Draven. The challenge is legally binding. Refusal constitutes forfeiture. The arena exploded into noise. Students shouted, argued, and scrambled for their communication devices. Within the hour, every cohort on Pinnacle Ascendant knew what had happened. A Deathworlder, a human, had been struck by a HFY noble and had not moved. And now they were going to fight. Bets began circulating before dinner. The odds favored Draven heavily. He was bigger, heavier, armored in natural scales, and came from a species literally bred for combat over thousands of generations. The human girl was small, unproven, and had shown nothing remarkable in any training exercise. Shale found Kira in their room that evening. Kira was sitting on her bunk, cleaning the 3 shallow cuts on her cheek with antiseptic. She looked calm. She looked like she was getting ready for a normal day. "You planned this," Shale said. Kira did not deny it. "I gave him every chance to stop. He chose not to." "He is twice your size." "Yes. He has claws and a tail and scales that can stop a blade." "Yes." Shale's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Are you not afraid?" Kira set down the antiseptic and looked at her friend. "I am not afraid of him, Shale. I am afraid of what I might do if I stop being careful." Late that night, long after Shale had fallen asleep, Kira went to the academy gymnasium alone. The room was empty, lit by dim emergency strips along the ceiling. She stood in front of a heavy sparring bag, a reinforced cylinder designed to absorb impacts from species twice her mass. She unwrapped the compression bands she had worn around her forearms since the day she arrived. Beneath them, her arms were lean but corded with dense, hard muscle that moved like cable under her skin. She set her feet, she breathed once. Then she hit the bag. The first strike sent a shockwave through the chain, holding it to the ceiling. The second made the chain groan. The third split the outer casing of the bag from top to bottom, spilling dense filler material across the floor in a shower of black dust. She stood in the silence that followed, her fist still extended, her breathing perfectly even. The destroyed bag swung gently on its broken chain. Behind her in the doorway, Shale stood with her wings pressed flat against her back and her compound eyes wide open. She had followed Kira. She had seen everything. Kira turned and looked at her. Neither of them spoke. The gymnasium hummed softly around them, and somewhere deep in the station, the clock counted down toward tomorrow. The main arena of Pinnacle Ascendant had not been used for a formal duel in over 6 years. It was a circular space, 50 meters across, with a reinforced composite floor designed to absorb the impacts of species far larger than humans. Around its edges, tiered observation decks rose in concentric rings, capable of holding over 3,000 spectators. By the time the sun lamps shifted to evening cycle, every seat was filled. They came from every cohort on the station. Students who had never spoken to Kira or Draven pressed together in the upper tiers, craning their necks for a better view. Instructors lined the lower railings with their arms folded and their expressions carefully neutral. Off-duty maintenance crews and station personnel filled the standing areas near the exits. Word had spread beyond the academy itself. A Deathworlder was fighting a HFY noble, and no one wanted to miss it. The noise was enormous. Hundreds of species talked, argued, and shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. The air smelled of tension and recycled atmosphere and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Draven entered first. He came through the eastern gate wearing ceremonial HFY combat dress, lightweight composite armor shaped to follow the contours of his scaled body, leaving his arms and claws free. His bone crest had been polished until it gleamed under the arena lights. He walked with the slow, deliberate stride of a predator who owned the ground beneath his feet. At the center of the arena, he stopped and performed the traditional HFY war display. He spread his arms wide, flexed his claws, and let out a deep, resonant hiss that vibrated through the floor and into the bones of everyone watching. His tail swept the ground behind him in a wide arc. His golden eyes scanned the crowd, drinking in the attention, feeding on it. The arena roared in response. Whatever else Draven was, he was spectacular to look at. 7 feet of scaled muscle and ancient warrior heritage, every inch of him built to intimidate. Then Kira entered through the western gate. She wore her standard academy training uniform. Gray fabric, no armor, no padding. No reinforcement of any kind. Her dark hair was tied back. Her feet were bare. The 3 thin scabs from Draven's claws were still visible on her left cheek. She walked to the center of the arena without ceremony, without display, without even looking at the crowd. She stopped 10 paces from Draven and stood still. The noise in the arena faltered. Something about the contrast, the massive armored reptilian and the small, bare human girl, created a visual that was almost absurd. A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the upper tiers. In the lower rows, those who had read Earth's file did not laugh. Commander Valley stood on the officiating platform and raised 2 of his 4 arms. The arena fell silent. Formal duel under Academy Code 7, subsection 14. Combatants Lord Draven Salvathi of House Salvathi HFY Dominion, and Kira Vasquez Earth Sol System. He paused. Terms are unarmed combat, victory by submission or incapacitation, no lethal force, begin on my signal. He dropped his arms. Draven moved immediately. He closed the distance in 3 massive strides, his right claw sweeping in a wide arc aimed at Kira's torso. It was fast, blindingly fast by galactic standards. The kind of opening strike that had ended dozens of sparring matches in his career before they even began. Kira leaned back 3 inches, and the claw passed through empty air. Draven did not pause. He followed with a left hook, then a tail sweep, then a lunging grab with both hands. Each attack was powerful, precise, and delivered with the full weight of his body behind it. Any one of them would have broken bones in most species at the Academy. Kira dodged every single one. She moved like something liquid, never rushed, never panicked, slipping between his attacks with margins so small they seemed impossible. His claw missed her throat by the width of a finger. His tail swept the space where her legs had been a fraction of a second earlier. His grab closed on air where her shoulder had just existed. The crowd watched in stunned silence. For 30 full seconds, Kira did nothing but evade. She never struck back. She never raised her hands. She simply moved, reading every attack before it landed, her brown eyes locked on Draven's body with the calm focus of someone studying a problem. Draven's breathing grew heavier. His attacks grew wider, more aggressive, fueled by frustration. He was not used to missing. He was not used to an opponent who would not stand still and take what he gave. He roared, a deep, primal sound from the base of his chest, and threw everything he had into a massive overhand strike with his right fist. It was the hardest blow he had ever thrown in a training arena, driven by rage and humiliation, and the desperate need to prove that he was still what he had always believed himself to be. Kira caught his fist in her bare hand. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena floor. Dust rose from the composite surface in a ring around their feet. The sound was like a thunderclap, sharp and final. Draven's arm trembled, his muscles strained, his scales flushed dark with exertion. Kira's arm did not move. Her fingers were wrapped around his fist like iron bands, and she held him there with no visible effort. Her expression had not changed. Her breathing had not quickened. She looked up at him with those calm brown eyes, and in them Draven saw something he had never seen directed at him before. Patience. Not anger, not hatred, not the wild fire of a cornered animal, just the steady, immovable patience of something that had been built by a world that broke everything that was not strong enough to endure it. What happened next lasted less than 40 seconds, but it rewrote every assumption the Academy had ever made about humans. Kira released his fist and moved inside his guard before he could react. She struck him once in the solar plexus, a short, precise blow that folded his body forward. Before he could recover, she hooked her foot behind his ankle and swept his legs. 300 pounds of HFY warrior hit the arena floor with a crash that shook the observation platforms. Draven tried to rise. Kira was already on him. She pinned his right arm with her knee, locked his left wrist against the floor with one hand and placed her other hand flat against his throat. Not squeezing, not choking, just resting there with exactly enough pressure to make a point. His tail whipped toward her. She caught it with her free hand without looking and pressed it to the ground. The arena was silent. 3,000 beings held their breath. Draven thrashed beneath her. He bucked, twisted, and strained with every ounce of strength his species had given him. He was a HFY, descended from apex predators, raised in a warrior culture, trained since childhood to fight and dominate. He could not move her. Kira leaned down until her face was close to his. The arena lights caught the thin scabs on her cheek, the marks his claws had left the day before. She whispered something. Her lips moved and Draven's golden eyes widened. His struggling slowed, then it stopped entirely. The arena did not hear what she said. They only saw the fight leave him, not from exhaustion, but from something else, something that hit harder than any blow. Kira released him. She stood and stepped back. She extended her hand downward, offering to help him up. Draven lay on the floor for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. Then he rolled to his side and pushed himself up on his own, ignoring her hand. He did not look at her. He did not look at anyone. Commander Vales raised his arms. The duel is concluded. Winner Kira Vasquez, Cohort Vethon, Earth. The silence held for one more heartbeat. Then the arena erupted. The sound was deafening, shouting, disbelief, arguments breaking out across every tier. Students who had bet on Draven threw their data pads. Students who had watched the lecture on Deathworlds gripped each other's arms and said nothing. Instructors exchanged long, heavy looks. Kira walked toward the western gate. The crowd parted for her without being asked. As she passed Commander Vales, the old Torvon veteran looked down at her with his scarred face and nodded once, a small, deliberate gesture that carried the weight of everything he understood about what had just happened. Kira nodded back. "You held back," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Kira kept walking. She did not deny it. Behind her, the arena continued to roar, and the galaxy's understanding of what a Deathworld could produce began, slowly and irreversibly, to change. The Academy did not return to normal after the duel. It shifted, the way a river shifts when a stone is dropped into its center. The water still flows, but nothing follows quite the same path it did before. Kira Vasquez became the most talked-about student on Pinnacle Ascendant overnight. Every cohort knew her name. Every species had an opinion. Some students looked at her with open awe, whispering about what they had seen in the arena. The way she had caught a HFY fist in her bare hand. The way she had moved like something from a world that did not forgive slowness. Others avoided her, pressing themselves against corridor walls when she passed, as if her mere presence carried a gravitational threat they could feel in their bones. A few resented her. They said it was a trick, an unfair advantage of biology, that no species should be allowed to carry that much raw physical power in such a small frame. Kira ignored all of it. She went back to her routine the very next morning: breakfast in the mess hall, lectures, training, study sessions in the archive with Shale. She did not boast. She did not retell the story. When a group of younger students from a visiting cohort approached her and asked her to describe the fight, she said simply, "He swung. I moved. It ended." Then she went back to her reading. The political consequences, however, were not so easily set aside. Draven's family moved quickly. Within 2 days of the duel, a formal inquiry was filed by House Salvathi, claiming the challenge had been improperly conducted and that the human had used some form of concealed enhancement or illegal modification. The Kethvari Dominion's Academy liaison demanded a full review of the footage. Commander Vales handled it personally. He presented the unedited security recordings to the review board in a closed session. The footage showed everything clearly: Draven's public insults over several weeks, the incident in the corridor with Shale, the confrontation in the training hall, and the strike. The recording showed Draven hitting Kira across the face with his claws unsheathed, in front of 200 witnesses, without provocation. The inquiry collapsed in a single afternoon. The review board ruled the duel legal, the challenge valid, and the outcome binding. House Salvathi's liaison left the station without making a public statement. The matter was closed. Draven himself was different after the duel, though the change was not immediate or dramatic. He did not suddenly become kind. He did not apologize to the students he had bullied. He did not seek Kira out to make peace. What he did was stop. He stopped targeting the weaker students. He stopped making public displays of dominance. He stopped filling rooms with his voice and his presence just to remind everyone that he could. Instead, he became quiet. He attended training. He completed his assignments. He sat in the mess hall with his circle, but he no longer performed for them. Something inside him had shifted, cracked, perhaps, and he was still figuring out what the new shape was. No one knew what Kira had whispered to him during the pin. Draven did not share it, and Kira never mentioned it. It lived between the two of them like a private wound, and for weeks it sat in Draven's mind like a stone he could not put down. She had said, "You are not weak because you lost. You are weak because you only know how to hurt things smaller than you. That is not strength, that is fear." He replayed those words in his head during training. He replayed them when he looked in the mirror and saw the face of a noble son who had been taught since birth that power meant dominance, that respect was taken, never earned. He replayed them when he watched Kira walk through the corridors with Shale at her side, this small human girl who had beaten him without rage and then offered him her hand. It was the hand that haunted him most. She had won. She had pinned him to the floor in front of 3,000 people and stripped away every illusion he had built around himself, and then she had offered to help him up. He had refused, and he could not stop thinking about why. Shale, meanwhile, threw herself into something new. The duel had not frightened her. It had lit something inside her that burned with the steady flame of academic obsession. She began compiling research notes for a thesis she titled Deathworld Socialization and the Evolution of Cooperative Aggression. She read everything she could find about Earth, its history, its cultures, its wars, and its kindnesses, the way humans had evolved not just to survive but to protect each other, to form bonds so strong they would die for strangers. Her central argument was elegant and unsettling. She wrote that what made humans terrifying was not their strength, their density, their endurance, or their tolerance for pain. Those things were just biology, accidents of gravity and predator pressure. What made them truly dangerous was something far more complex. It was their ability to choose. They could kill and chose not to. They could dominate and chose to cooperate. They carried the tools of a predator inside a mind that had learned empathy, and that combination, the capacity for violence married to the choice of gentleness, was the most formidable adaptation any species in the galaxy had ever produced. She showed a draft to Kira one evening. Kira read it slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You make us sound very noble," Kira said. "I make you sound very dangerous," Shale corrected. Kira smiled. "Those are sometimes the same thing." The final test came 6 weeks after the duel, during a formal diplomatic reception held at the Academy for visiting dignitaries. The evening was meant to showcase the station's top students and foster connections between species. White lights filled the grand hall. Officers wore their dress uniforms. Students stood in polished rows. Kira was standing near the edge of the room, holding a glass of water and watching the crowd, when a shadow fell across her. General Kale Salvathi, Draven's uncle, stood before her. He was even larger than Draven, older, with deep scars across his snout and eyes that carried the cold weight of decades of command. He wore the formal armor of a HFY war general, and the medals on his chest clinked softly as he breathed. The conversations around them died. Students backed away. Even the instructors turned to watch. "You are the human," the general said. His voice was deep enough to vibrate the floor. "I am," Kira said. "You humiliated my nephew. You shamed my bloodline before this entire station." He leaned down, his scarred face filling her field of vision. "You will apologize, publicly, tonight, or you will learn what it means to make an enemy of House Salvathi." The grand hall held its breath. Kira looked up at the general. She did not step back. She did not look away. She set her glass down on a nearby table with a soft click and folded her hands in front of her. "Your nephew struck me," she said. Her voice was calm and carried clearly across the silent hall. "He struck me in front of 200 witnesses with his claws unsheathed, without provocation. I answered his challenge within the legal framework of this academy, and I won. The review board has confirmed this. The footage is public record." She paused. Her brown eyes held the general's golden ones without flinching. "If your bloodline is shamed," she said, "it is not by my hand." The general's jaw tightened. His claws flexed at his sides. The air between them was thick enough to choke on. Then behind Kira, Commander Valey stepped forward. He said nothing. He simply stood there, 4 arms at his sides, scarred face forward, his massive frame a wall of silent authority. Beside him, 2 other senior instructors moved into position, then 3 more, then 5. They stood behind the human girl in a line, shoulder to shoulder, and not one of them spoke a word. They did not need to. The message was carved into the silence itself. "She is one of ours." General Salvathi looked at the line of instructors. He looked at the watching crowd. He looked at Kira, this small creature from a violent world who stood before him without trembling and spoke the truth in a voice that did not waver. He turned and left the hall. His footsteps echoed against the polished floor, and no one followed. The reception resumed slowly, like blood returning to a numb limb. Students whispered. Instructors returned to their positions. Kira picked up her glass of water and took a sip. 3 weeks later, on a quiet evening in the training hall, Draven found Kira alone. She was sitting on a bench, wrapping her hands before a workout. He stood in the doorway for a long time, and she let him stand there without acknowledging him. Finally, he walked in and sat down beside her. He did not look at her. He stared at the floor, his massive clawed hands resting on his knees. "How do humans train in full gravity?" he asked. His voice was low and rough, stripped of everything it used to carry. Kira looked at him. She studied his face, the pride still there, battered but not gone, and beneath it something new, something fragile and uncertain and reaching toward a shape it did not yet understand. She reached into her bag and pulled out a set of wrist weights. Standard Earth training gear, dense, heavy, unremarkable. She held them out to him. "Start light," she said. He took them. Their fingers did not touch, but something passed between them all the same, not forgiveness, not friendship, but the beginning of a bridge built from the wreckage of what had come before. Outside the training hall, the stars turned slowly beyond the station's observation windows. Somewhere far below, the gas giant Velhari Prime glowed in bands of amber and gold. And somewhere even farther, on a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star, the gravity pulled at everything with a constant, patient, unyielding hand, shaping bones and muscle and hearts into something the galaxy was only just beginning to understand. The Academy had learned what a Deathworld could produce. Not the claws or the teeth or the raw, crushing power, though those were real and those were terrible. It had learned about the restraint, the choice, the quiet, deliberate kindness of a creature that could break the world and chose, every single day, to hold it gently instead. That was what Earth made. That was what made it dangerous.